Welcome back to another edition of the Stats and Scars episode, recording every Thursday. This is another feature episode of the Shadow the Script Network. So this week we got some fantasy football playoff injuries, plus our usual down bad list. The medical guy joins me for the injury list here in just a second. We're also going to be getting into the NFL Christmas predictions. We're going to be kind of skipping over Week 16 and trickling into Week 17. Christmas is on a Wednesday. And these two teams, ironically, I think they play each other. You were mentioning it before. They play each other the week before or something on the same day, and then play again the next week.
Yeah, it's the same combination of four teams within essentially 4 days.
Yeah.
So it's like it's going to be interesting to see what kind of games we get.
Yeah, a lot of tape being exchanged there.
A lot of ice.
Yeah. And then we got the Heisman analysis. We're going to go over whether we agree or disagree with Travis Hunter winning the Heisman and the other candidates, and the paparazzi around it, I guess. We're going to get into the college football playoff bracketology. I promised in the last episode we were going to focus on it heavy in this one, so we're excited. We're basically going to attack two different portions of the bracket. Medical guy is going to take Texas and Clemson, as well as SMU and Penn State, how they got there, what's the predictions. I'll chime in as well. Then I'm going to take the other side, Notre Dame and Indiana, and Tennessee and Ohio State. And that'll wrap up the episode towards the end there. So, without further ado, if you're a first-time listener, you can find us at Shadow the Script on TikTok, Instagram, or Twitter. That for video content and whatnot. And then you can go to YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts to find all of our podcast episodes. These will be obviously titled The Stats and Scars, and the other ones will be titled Shadow the Script. And they're all about an hour, so not too much time wasted in your workday if you're looking at Excel sheets all day. So, Merry Christmas, so let's get into it. The injury list.
All right, let's get into this injury list. So the first few of them will be more like fantasy-based, and then we'll go into a little home cooking with Cowboys. But first we're going to get into it with our guys that are out, okay? So that are officially ruled out. So obviously everybody heard about Nick Chubb. Brutal news for him. You know, he came back from that gruesome injury. Obviously there's been some type of load management there because he's not getting these bell cow carries, and plus the team is not what they, envisioned them being this year. So a lot of games are being played from behind. A lot of times they're having to throw the ball a lot. Unfortunately, they've had to throw the ball a lot in the last couple of games now that it's gone. But it's just something to see. In the past, you've seen how well Chubb's recovered from injury, so no doubt we'll probably, see some of these videos come out in like 3 months of him squatting 715 pounds on a wobbly bar or something like that. And so, it's just tough to see because I do believe he's either 29, about to turn 30, or he's 29 right now, or about to turn 29. And so he's kind of getting to that stage of a running back career where even without injuries, a lot of times it falls off. And with the injuries he's been through, man, it's just going to be real tough to see, how he recovers and if he ever gets back to that game shape that he was in before. So, thoughts and prayers out to him. Hopefully it is an easy and efficient and speedy recovery, but let's just hope he heals again, because that's not only tough on the physical aspect, but it's got to be brutal on the mental aspect of it and the psychological aspect of it, because, that's 2 years in a row that he's had, almost 3 years in a row, he's had just brutal injuries. So next is David Montgomery. I think we all saw that come out. That's a big blow to the Lions, who are injury-ridden right now, a lot of it on defense. But this is kind of their first big blow to the offense. And we know, what do they call them, Sonic and Knuckles or whatever back there, that, it's kind of been a, thunder lightning type thing. Really, both lightning, it seems like, because they're both very good, and they're both averaging, I think, over 4.5 yards a carry. Yeah. Something crazy like that. But we saw that he's going to be out. Had an MCL sprain. Apparently it's bad enough that he had to have surgery. A lot of times you don't hear about them having surgery on that MCL. Just with where it is in the body and how it heals and whatnot. But for him to have surgery on it, that means it was pretty bad. Regardless if it was a grade 2, grade 3 MCL sprain, with that ligament being so big and so strong, it causes a lot of pain when you do mess it up. So even if he wasn't going to have surgery, he'd probably be out, unless they made it to like, semifinal games. He would be out a while.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
sucks for him. Sucks for a lot of those fantasy owners and stuff like that. I'll mention another thing going into my DB list about that. But I don't know if you saw it, but it'll have to be, doing with future bets and stuff like that. So next, we're going to go into people that are questionable. David Njoku, tight end for the Browns. We saw, he's kind of been injury-ridden the last 3 or 4 years. Always something kind of dinged up. It doesn't seem like anything's too crazy, but it is a hamstring injury. I've preached before about hamstrings. They're never as simple as they seem. Obviously, it's bad enough he had to take a week off. So we'll see where it goes from there. I know that's a big fantasy. That's a big target for Jameis Winston outside of Jared Judy right now. And so, as tight end number 1 for a lot of teams. So, kind of keep on the lookout there. I don't know if I'd go with the backup tight end for the Browns, but I know Dalton Kincaid's actually sitting out there on the waiver wire for a lot of leagues. A few of them that I'm in. So yeah. So keep a lookout for that. Next, we're gonna go Jalen Waddle. Okay, he had a knee injury. Reports are saying that it's not as serious as it seems, so that's good. However, in the same reports, they're saying it's not required. Like surgery is not going to be required. That doesn't sound like it's going to be a short-term thing to me. Like if the words surgery are written in the reports, even if it says it's not required, that doesn't necessarily seem like it's going to be he's going to be back that week kind of thing.
Right. Yeah.
So interesting thing there.
Shutting it down too.
Yeah, exactly. And especially with how anemic that offense looked this past week. And so you can see kind of when Jalen Waddle gets out of there or when injuries happen, that team kind of goes into that real short RPO, very short route, efficient routes. And, it's kind of the knock on Tua is that when stuff doesn't go exactly right, it's wrong. Like, it's not like he necessarily makes up for it. So that's going to be real interesting to see with that offense. Next, Alvin Kamara came out with a groin injury this week. So keep an eye out on that. They didn't say whether it was week to week or day to day or anything like that. But, he gets a lot of touches, whether it be carries or, receptions or stuff like that. So he plays a lot. He plays almost every down in the game. So keep an eye out on that for load management or how much he really will play that game. Next, Hollywood Brown looking to return this week. So that'll be big for the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't know what kind of offense they're going to run because it seems like they have at least some weapons, and then you watch them play and they're just grinding games. And so it'll be interesting to see how much he plays and what kind of offense revolves around him. So keep an eye on that. I don't know if this week would be the week to start him, but maybe in 2 weeks, 3 weeks when he's comfortable and can play a full game, or at least 50-60% of the snaps, you could see a big return on investment there. Next, we're gonna go a little bit out of fantasy. We're gonna go to the Cowboys. We saw Trayvon Diggs had an injury with that knee. Yep. I'll just go through him real quick, and then I'll kind of touch back on that Trayvon Diggs. Overshown, tough to see. I know you kind of talked about him last week with that knee injury. That's tough to see for him. Hopefully this doesn't take our what it seems like typical linebacker route for the last few that we've had with Sean Lee and Leighton Vander Esch and Jalen Smith, where it seems like we find these dudes and then injuries just, they're just riddled with injuries and then it ends up shortening their career, especially for a guy like Overshown, who's obviously very explosive, gets downhill real quick and just makes these freak athletic plays. Hopefully that doesn't take away from him, so we'll see how that goes. Next is the Dallas O-line. If you watch this game this last week, it just seemed like once we got into the second half, it was just like everybody was getting hurt. You'll probably see a bunch of names you didn't know coming out this week playing O-line for Dallas. And they've already had to shuffle that line around a lot, with Zach Martin, Tyler Guyton kind of being in and out with injury, with neck injuries, with back injuries, stuff like that. Only consistent one, knock on wood, that seems to be staying there is Terrence Steele, because we've seen Tyler Smith kind of be in and out a little bit this year. So it'll be interesting to see how they do this next week, especially playing the Bucs. But kind of circle back and touch on that Trayvon Diggs injury. He's coming back from that ACL injury this year from last year. And all of us talking off script, we talked about how and a lot of it, he looked kind of slow, kind of mechanical. And you could really see in the last couple of weeks, and then he was out this game, and then it came out that he did have to have surgery on that knee. And I read a report that it could be dealing with some type of cartilage issue. Now, in all my years of at least watching professional sports, luckily, in the demographic I have to work with, we don't see too many cartilage issues because I work at a junior college. So thank God we don't see necessarily too many cartilage issues with 18 to 22-year-old individuals. But when you get into the older individuals, stuff like that, people that have had knee injuries, knee surgeries like that, and they have to get into the cartilage aspect of it, it kind of is a kiss of death for especially a lot of those higher level athletes. And not so much about how they can perform, it's how they deal with it afterwards. Okay. So we all know you played football and stuff like that. Post game stuff, a couple days later, like you're sore, you're bruised.
Yeah.
Okay. You know, some days you like get up and eat and then go get back in the bed, or like you ice bath it until you can't feel your toes. And then you're like, oh God, 30 minutes of relief kind of thing.
That's right.
You know, with these cartilage injuries is you end up having people that can still play to their potential, but they don't recover as fast. And so it's that, you know, you can get ready in a day or two where it takes 4 or 5 days to where you even feel good. Biggest example, and I know you may not watch hockey, but a couple years ago, the Stars had a goalie, Ben Bishop, who was very good, okay? Ended up having knee issues and whatnot. And I mean, it took him a year and a half to kind of get to where he could play. And he played, and you could see, like, he could still play, and he could still play his position very well. But he came out in his presser and literally said the next day, he was like, I couldn't move my leg. And
Jeez.
that's just what it is like, it's one thing to be sore to where, it's tough to move around. But, like, when you come back the next day and your knee's swollen up and you can't bend it, it's really tough to recover from. And then that's what you look at, especially in, telling what an injury is with how much swelling there is. And if you've got something that's fixed and everything, such as ligaments and whatnot, but the cartilage is an issue and that causes to automatically blow up a day after, and you're having to play games, in 2 or 3 days or a week and then have to strap it on like that, it's really tough to just recover from that and then be at 100% all the time. And we all know, even in the professional leagues, you still have to practice a little bit, whether it be walkthroughs or shells or anything like that, or even practicing, there's times where you have guys that are like, hey, they're Thursday, Friday guys, right?
Right.
Monday, you're doing your whatever, Tuesday, Wednesday, they're doing stuff on the side. Thursday, Friday, they're practicing full, and with that cartilage issue, you end up being a person that you don't practice all week. You just try to get all the symptoms down. And then you start looking into future stuff like, hey, am I going to be able to walk? Hey, how long can I do this? Like, are there going to be some vascular stuff? Or am I going to have arthritis by the time I'm 30? And that's just what you don't want. Am I going to have a knee replacement by the time I'm, 35 or 40?
Exactly.
And that's just brutal to see. Hopefully that's not the case completely, and they can shave something down and have it to where he can go through stuff without feeling so much pain. But in what I've seen, especially in professional athletes, when you get to that cartilage issue, it really becomes like a kiss of death. And it sucks to see. Hopefully it's not, but that's kind of my insight on that. So.
Yeah. I think with Trayvon Diggs, and, I talked about whether or not, cutting ties with him would be the right move and whatnot. I mean, I guess you would have to kind of see. But in terms of this defense, to which, at one point you said you had all the right pieces to where you're like, oh, we've got an edge rusher. We've got a pretty good cornerback room when they're healthy. We've got the young linebackers. Now it's a big, Riddler question mark to where you have to kind of go in and it's an enigma. How are we going to solve this? How are we going to approach the draft when we already know we had plenty of things to solve before these injuries, filling in missing pieces? So, with Trayvon Diggs specifically, you could tell when he was playing that, at first it was, I think his calf's really tight. He's questionable. I don't know if he's going to play. And then you look at him, he's making business decisions on tackles, which is a common thing for Diggs. And, and you got his players defending him, and rightfully so. I understand it. But it's going to be a long haul for Trayvon Diggs. And, if he comes back too soon, I mean, it's just going to be brutal on social media, people grilling him. I mean, he's probably the most criticize cornerback in the league because he wears a star on his helmet, and it's not even to say that people say he's top 3. It's just literally, he's a pretty good cornerback, and people will grill him for every mistake he makes and will totally disregard an injury. So for his mental state, I hope he really battles back. But if it's one of those things where he's like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, then so be it. You had a good career, and hopefully he doesn't turn to that. But it's a long road. And then, you got Overshown, like what you were talking about earlier. Reports, and you probably have it, but like the reports were saying he's probably not even going to be back until 2026 in a second. I think it's not the ACL he already tore, but the other one.
Yeah.
So it's not good news for the Cowboys.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you see that a lot with ACLs and stuff like that, and surgical issues that happen and injuries. Is that you spend so much time recuperating this other leg and getting it in that the other one doesn't necessarily get forgotten about, but it's just also not used to doing the same thing. Now, obviously, we saw on the play, it's football. It was a contact injury. It wasn't like he was cutting or something. But it's still just tough to see. You do all this stuff, you get back to an extremely high level of football, and then some freak injury happens where it literally was just someone, rolled, hit his leg in. The common by the book how an ACL gets torn is you have that motion going in with the leg bent, and, boom, there it goes again. Then all of a sudden it's ACL, it's meniscus, it's all kinds of other stuff. And so it's just tough to see.
Yeah, no doubt. And yeah, I mean, we'll be covering it as it goes along with how the offseason, especially whenever draft time comes around, how they're going to be able to address all those injuries and missing pieces. And God, man, I mean, it was just a brutal season for the Cowboys in terms of, not even really performance. I would say more lenient on just injury based. I mean,
absolutely.
Was hurt. It was bad.
Yeah.
And so, all right, let's get into the DB list, the down bad list.
DB list. So I got a couple of them. I'm going to start off with this one. For any of you degenerate gamblers out there, this was definitely a DB list candidate. And we're going to mention him again, David Montgomery. I don't know if you saw the reports come out that his total yards betting this year, his over-under was 775.5, and he had 775. So for anybody that took that bet, which looked like an absolute log, that's a tough scene. That is DB list material. I hope there are no 12-leg parlays that you got going or the kids got going that's dependent on that, and then you just sit there and you just stare at your phone, just in silence, just wondering what could have been. And that's just I think the Scott Van Pelt show does it, calling a bad beat. That is a 1,000% bad beat. That's tough to see. So
that's when scared money don't make money kind of phrase just goes, it's lost in the wind at that point. You're like, I have no control over that.
Yeah, and you don't even have a chance to like cash that out. You get into like week 17 or whatever, and you're like, I don't know, I'd cash this out for, a couple grand right here instead of waiting it out. You cash that out or whatever. No, it's just the glory is just ripped right out of your hands. The feeling of going into, Christmas season, you got a little money on your hands, and now it's like, nope, sorry about you.
I'm about to be paid back for Christmas gifts, everything. Gonna have a little money on the side for myself, and
boom. Yeah. Oh, brutal. So
next man up mentality bites back.
Yeah, so that was my DB candidate, and not Montgomery himself, but all the bettors out there that took that over and just got waxed by it.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had no idea that was the bet prop. That is unbelievable. The chances of that too are probably like 1 in a million.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for my DB list candidate, I'm gonna go back to Caleb Williams, and I think for the most part, I had like this little spiel because he's gone on these like 2-3 game runs where you're like, oh, he's playing pretty good, and then he goes back on these other runs where it's like 4 or 5 game stretches, and you're like, what are you doing? And so he's on that now. Actually, I just got a report. The Falcons are benching Kirk Cousins and will start Michael Penix Jr. on Sunday versus the Giants.
Really?
Wow.
Wow.
Adam Schefter on the report. You heard it here first. No, but that's interesting. I'm excited to see that T's and P's for Kirk Cousins. But yeah, no, like with Caleb Williams, there's a clip that came out where he's continuing to kind of just dance around the pocket and run around, like ring around the rosy essentially in the pocket, 20, 30 times a game. And, I saw this tweet that I want to connect with it that was like, a couple of accounts were like, do you agree or disagree with this take? And it basically is like, Caleb Williams has the worst offensive weapons in the league, is what he said. He's got, like, clearly Rome Odunze is the best on their roster, and that DJ Moore and Keenan Allen aren't capable of producing. And that is laughable. That is laughable. Anybody would kill to have what Caleb Williams has as offensive weapons, including Cole Kmet, who's a pretty dang good tight end. So, anyway, if you watch Caleb Williams play and you watch him run around the pocket and you think that's a good quarterback play, you're out of your mind. We said it wasn't going to work in college to the NFL, and now we're seeing it in the NFL. And I know it's his rookie year, and you can't be too early, but DB list candidate for me is watching this guy do ring around the rosy in the pocket. It's making these receivers run 5 miles of cardio per game, and they've lost 8 straight now. So, does it work? No, it doesn't. So he'll learn, but
yeah. And just to add on to my DB list candidate, I was just reading through some of the reports on that prop. David Montgomery's last run before he got injured was -2 yards.
Oh my God!
So he was sitting at 777, which would have
the holy
capped
number.
it. Yeah, which would have had that over hit, and he had a -2 yard run, got hurt, removed from the game, having surgery, which put him at 775.
Yeah, that's a better. Yeah, God, that's brutal. That's a better. You're looking at it going, hey, are we sure it was a 2 yard loss, or was it more 1.5? I mean, forward progress,
Oh man,
that's worse.
Yeah, that makes it. I was just reading it and I was like, no shot, this is true. And then looked it up a little more and it was like -2 yards. I'm like, no.
Yeah, the phrase, starving families is what that is.
Yeah, that's one where I might need to check myself into hey, are you a gambling addict? Call blah 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 blah. It's like I'm calling
gambler.
Yeah, I'm calling Vegas right there, just being like. Bleep, 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 bleep.
I'm calling the hotline after that and be like, hey, look, I'm struggling.
Yeah, I'm scrounging through all of his stats throughout the year, just hoping to find some type of correction, like maybe not a forward pass, like it was backwards or whatever.
Yeah, no kidding. I would do the same thing. All right, any more DB list candidates? I think.
I mean, there's the Jameis Winston one. That one was pretty funny, but I think the Montgomery one is just like. I just look at it more and I'm like, that's brutal, dude.
Yeah. I guess you could put Kirk Cousins and Jameis Winston on there. They both got benched. The Lord did not deliver them from pick sixes, unfortunately. So
yeah,
that's brutal. All right, let's transition into the NFL Christmas predictions. Like I said earlier at the beginning of the podcast, Week 16 does not include the Christmas games. So. Week 16, we'll have a Monday night game that's the 23rd, and that's the New Orleans Saints and the Packers. And there's some pretty good matchups this weekend for the semifinal of fantasy football playoffs. But we just wanted to get covered next week because we probably won't do a Stats and Scars episode during the holidays. And we're going to do Kansas City versus Pittsburgh on Wednesday. I think this is the first game of the day on Christmas Day with 4 days of rest. So, Kansas City currently sits at 13-1. Pittsburgh currently sits at 10-4. I believe, is it Pittsburgh and Baltimore play each other? Is that the way this week? I don't know how it goes.
So for this week, Texans Chiefs play each other. So Saturday, December 21st, Texans and Chiefs play each other, and then the Steelers and Ravens play each other, and then on Christmas Day, the Chiefs and Steelers play each other. And the Ravens and Texans play each other. So just a kind of a weird little setup there. So
yes, agreed. All right. All right, your predictions for the for Christmas Day. Will the Kansas City Chiefs pull out another Christmas miracle?
So yeah, my prediction. Yeah, I think the I actually have this written down wrong on here, but yeah, I think the Chiefs win 17-10 and a typical Kansas City win. Um, I think it's going to be an ugly game. It seems like these are two teams that kind of win the same way right now, where you just need okay quarterback play, really good defense, and kind of last person that has the ball kind of wins the game type of thing. But I don't think there's going to be anything crazy come out of here. Um, I think Pittsburgh's going to take kind of a little skid here going into the future, just because I think they're realizing, like, yes, Russell Wilson can play decent against maybe subpar teams, but he's not going to be that quarterback or that weapon that's just going to absolutely get you over the hump. So I've got Kansas City beating Pittsburgh 17-10.
Yeah, I like that. I have a very similar prediction because once again, I mean, you're going on Monday and Tuesday as your day of rest, and then going into Wednesday and playing on a holiday. That is usually, with Thursday night football, you see some sloppy football, and like we saw last week with the Rams and 49ers. I know it was, the conditions were not so great, but at the same time, nobody wanted to watch that game after the second quarter. So these are going to be kind of like the analyst mentioned last week, games that you just kind of turn on and you're talking with family and there's a football game on and you're opening presents and having supper and whatever and whatnot. So with that being said, I think it's going to be sloppy. There's going to be a lot of defensive turnovers. I think Kansas City wins this game 21-17. And the late season gimmick from Patrick Mahomes continues to where it's like, ooh, my leg hurts, and then they come out, it's like a mild ankle sprain. You're like, okay, like it'll come out in 4 or 5 weeks that he had an Achilles tear and played through it, but we'll see. But he's fine, is all I got to say.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure we'll see a lot of reports from. Hopefully, it's not Chris Collingsworth working it, but if we do, there'll be like a slightly heavier tape job on that, and there'll be, you can do your little Chris Collingsworth impression, but it'll be like, my God, guys, look at this, look at this guy here. Now, this is a guy, that's just, rough around the edges, just does whatever he can to get the game done. I mean, look at this ankle tape. Like, oh my, like, no one's ever gotten their ankle tape before.
Exactly. It's like,
Yeah, I know.
Patrick Mahomes. Oh God. I honestly I'd probably do Mike Tirico better, but which is ironic. But all right, Baltimore Ravens go into Houston. They're both sitting at 9-5 currently. Houston will come off playing the Chiefs. Baltimore come off playing a divisional game against Pittsburgh. I think it's important to note in this game that Pittsburgh will probably rough up Baltimore pretty good, on Sunday, then going into Houston. But I've watched Houston play a lot this year, and I'm just not impressed at all. They're in that sophomore slump. They've had injuries to the receivers. Tank Dell really isn't producing like everyone thought he was going to do. Nico Collins is amazing. He's great.
Yeah.
And so is Mixon. But, with Baltimore, they can get to the passer in this game. I really think Baltimore is going to come out with a victory on this. So I think that'll happen. And you'll see Baltimore win 30-24. And they'll cement themselves as the number one team in their division after that.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way. The Texans, I don't know. It's kind of confusing. To me, it looks like the offense, especially when Joe Mixon's not running for 150 yards, like the passing game looks like it's gotten kind of stagnant. Like it's very one-dimensional. It's very C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins. Like that just seems like what it is. Looks very clunky. Just doesn't look like as fluid as it did last year. I don't know if it's because of tape. I don't know if it's because of, regression of some of the other receivers, which they have great ones. To me, it really is confusing how, you have Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and John Mechie, and how that, trio right there is not just lighting the league up, because you've got Nico Collins, who to me is similar to like a Mike Evans, CeeDee Lamb kind of guy, like may not be the fastest guy, but you can move him around wherever. You've
Yeah.
got Tank Dell, who's kind of like your twitchy guy. And then you've got, John Mechie, who can just outrun everybody. And it just doesn't seem like they can put it all together. And so to me, it's always been kind of weird seeing that trio not just flourish. And, outside of when all of the Texans receivers were hurt, John Mechie really hadn't done anything. And he was very well in those games that when they were hurt. And so I don't know, it's just very odd to see. I am very similar to your score, except I have it a little more of a gap between. I think the Ravens, I just think they're, like you said, they're going to get beat up, have to play a really, really tough defense. And the Steelers, I know the Texans defense is still pretty good. However, I think, they're not as good or as hard-nosed as the Steelers. And so I think the Ravens are going to win 31-17. I think, Lamar Jackson is going to have one of those crazy games where I think he's going to run a lot more than he's going to throw, which is not necessarily a bad thing because he's one of the most athletic people on the field. And so I think he's going to get a lot done with his legs this game. And I think it's going to kind of be a kind of a whooping.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely see that. The only thing that would contradict our takes on that game is that C.J. Stroud is a devout Christian, and that is the day of our Lord and Savior. So perhaps if Jesus wants to get involved in this game, you might see a clinic from C.J. Stroud. So who knows? And I'm not doubting that at all. I'm just saying, it's a possibility. We got to account for all outcomes.
Well, I mean, the Ravens defense isn't like your typical Ravens defense. They've got some injuries along there and whatnot. And even from really day one, they kind of get gashed a little bit. And so it'll be interesting to see. But the Texans just, I don't want to say fraud alert, but they just don't look like that team.
Yeah, me neither. And also to add to that, their division is horrible.
Awful.
It's the probably the worst division that I've seen in quite some time. Like, I think everyone's going to finish sub 6 wins.
Yeah.
Unless I don't think the Colts are. They might be 6-8 or something. I don't know, but they're bad too.
Yeah, they're not. They're no bueno.
Anthony Richardson started the game last week 5 of 17, and I was just like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay, Heisman analysis. So, as we all saw, we thought that, Travis Hunter winning the Heisman was going to be, the headlines were going to be Travis Hunter wins the Heisman, but instead, his girlfriend kind of stole a little bit of the spotlight there, which no one really cares about, so we're going to ignore that. But Travis Hunter winning the Heisman Trophy, playing two ways, playing on the Colorado Buffaloes, who went 9-3. They did not play in the conference championship game, nor did they make the playoffs. And then Ashton Genty, averaging like 12 yards a carry, 2,500 plus yards, 30 touchdowns, playing in a Mountain West schedule, I believe.
Yeah.
They're in the playoffs with the first round bye. Those are kind of the two arguments there that I've seen hovered around. Not to mention that I think Ashton Genty was like the closest first place like voted player who came in second in a long time in the Heisman.
Yeah.
I think it was like less than 300 votes. So, what are your thoughts? And I kind of spoke about it on my last podcast, but I don't think we've discussed Heisman since you've been on Stats and Scars.
Yeah, hadn't got to discuss it much. But it is pretty, I don't know, it's pretty cool to see like this award go to someone that's not a quarterback. Now, I mean, we can all have our opinions. I think it's cool that there are two people that are really in consideration for it. I really, they should have just invited two people. Dylan Gabriel was the other one, right?
Yeah, Dylan Gabriel.
Which easily could have been Cam Ward from Miami. I think if he would have been there, it might have been a little more closer of a third place. But yeah, just to shed a little light. I mean, I think it's kind of a lazy take when people say like, oh, Travis Hunter, is getting, we didn't know stamina was a stat or something like that. And I'm like, guys, like, to me, that almost sounds like a non-ball knower. Like you came from a small school, you played both ways, you knew how you felt after the game, during the game. I mean, I went to a small school. Yeah. And I mean, I didn't even play in high school, but I played, growing up, and even like playing baseball. Like if you pitched and hit in the same game, like it's tough. And not just the physical aspect of it, but like the fact that Travis Hunter could get torched on a route or something like that. And then he's have to, you got to call his name and be like, hey, bro, you got to get back there on offense. Like you've got to go run 97% of the plays ran in this game. And so I do think people need to sit there and think about that, is that like he was, a top, I don't know, top 5 cornerback and a top 12 receiver. And it seemed like receiving was kind of down this year anyway. But like just to shed light on the fact that like this dude was playing like 95+% of the snaps in all the games. And really there weren't any of the like blowout stats that people try to make that argument about, except the last game where they played Oklahoma State and beat them like 1,000-0. And so, I mean, I think he's deserving of it. I think Ashton Jeanty is definitely, or is it Ashton Jeanty?
Yep. Yes.
Yeah. I think he was also very deserving of it as well. And it kind of sucks because there were 2 games out there that he was out at half. I think there was one in the very beginning. It was against like, I don't know, some like Charleston State or something like that, where I think it was statistically like his worst game, and he still averaged like 6 yards a carry.
Yeah.
But he didn't have a touchdown, and he didn't reach 150 yards because he had like 114 by half, and they were up by like 37 at half. Yeah. And so there's a couple games out there where you could look back and be like, well, what if he would have ended up going for 234 and 2 touchdowns in either of those? And so it's just interesting. But it is awesome to see that this competition was actually close and it wasn't just quarterback driven. It's hard to say. I do think Travis Hunter should have won it. I think it really is amazing to see what he did.
Yeah. Kind of the Shohei Ohtani of college football. I mean, you can't really look at it any other way than that. I mean, Charles Woodson, years ago did the same thing. I believe won the Heisman. So, two-way player.
Yeah. And I mean, it wasn't like he was an offensive player that was running like scat back every 15 plays, or like they ran like a triple reverse to him. Like he was lining up out there. He was 1-1.
Yeah, he wasn't Jabril Peppers.
Yeah, he was DB1. He was wide receiver 1. So I think people just need to look at that and take that into a little more consideration. Like even if it was a stamina stat, like could you imagine like you play quarterback and whatever you played on defense. I don't know what you played on defense, but safety. Like safety. Like could you imagine being like running back and safety or receiver, number 1 receiver and safety like that? Like you're running like the most.
My brothers did all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I think the right person won, but you could make an easy argument for both.
Yeah. I think my biggest take from the previous episode, with the 2 candidates was this was probably the worst year to be a Heisman candidate with Travis Hunter, because it was one you simply couldn't ignore. Like Ashton Jeanty had every right to win the Heisman Trophy. I mean, no one's arguing that. That's why he got as many votes as he did. But like we just discussed, playing 2 sides of the ball and not playing 97% of the snaps on one side of the ball, but the entire game playing 90+% of the snaps is super impressive, because you talked about it a lot. Whenever, like we talked about with Bryce Underwood, the Michigan quarterback, it's like, yeah, you're 18-year-old kid. I don't care where you come from, where you go. If you go to that next level, everyone is just as good as you.
Yeah.
And you separate yourself like Travis Hunter did, and it stands out. And that's why I said I narrowly still believe, even after seeing the truthers out there for Ashton Jeanty trying to convince me the otherwise, that I believe that Travis Hunter should have won the Heisman. But yeah, it's like if Ashton Jeanty was the candidate last year or next year when Travis Hunter's gone, clear cut Heisman winner.
Yeah.
But this year you had Shohei Ohtani.
Yeah,
so
like he had to.
It's a brutal year.
Yeah, he had to break records. He would have had to have broken records to win this Heisman. Like if he'd have broken the rushing record, he probably wins. Yeah. Or touchdown record, he probably wins. And unfortunately, he came, within a few touchdowns and a few hundred yards to break it. And like you said, any other year, like he probably wins it unanimously.
Yes. Yeah. I 100% agree. And I think, like, a lot of people that would argue with that, uh, I would advise them to listen to what we just said
Yeah,
because, I think otherwise you're hating. I mean, it's
yeah,
just pure hating on talent because Travis Hunter and Ashton Genty are both going to get picked in the first round
oh yeah,
and go have great careers somewhere.
yeah,
Hunter maybe top 5, Ashton Genty probably top 15. Like, for a running back, that's incredible. So, anyway.
absolutely.
Yeah. All right. College football playoff bracketology. This is when we get into the good stuff. So here's how it's kind of going to work. Jacob's going to be taking one side of the bracket. He's going to be taking Texas versus Clemson. SMU is going to be going into Penn State. He'll be taking that game as well. He's going to be kind of discussing how these teams came to be, the strengths, weaknesses, key players, and whatnot, just kind of however he wants to tackle it. And then we're both kind of going to give our predictions, short and sweet predictions on these games. And then I'm going to be covering the Notre Dame, Indiana, and Tennessee and Ohio State side of the bracket, and we'll do the same thing. And then we'll kind of maybe discuss the rest of the path forward and our outcomes, similar like we did last week. But this week we're actually going to give our predictions for the game. I gave way too early ones about 2 weeks ago. But, yeah, so with some more time to think on it, it might change. You never know. All right, so I'll let you start off your side of the bracket.
All right, we're gonna start with the Penn State SMU because they're first. Okay, and this is basically a game between two top-notch quarterbacks. Okay, we saw that. I mean, I know I watched in that last game with Penn State versus Oregon. I mean, the quarterback for Penn State absolutely carried Penn State in that game. And some of those throws were, I mean, you could say just NFL worthy. Like, they were very good.
It's Drew Lamar, I think, right?
Yeah.
Is his name? Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I think if you look at their stats, like, I mean, that's their offense. Okay. I think, SMU's got more of like their quarterback and their running back. Penn State has more like their quarterback and they have a receiver that's very good. And so, just how they came to be, obviously Penn State in that Big 10 or Big 30, whatever they are now. They ran that gauntlet a little bit. I mean, you can't deny that they had to play some good teams. They had to play the Ohio State. They had to play Oregon in the championship. They had to play, all the decent Big Ten teams in there, and, they made it through it. So you got to give props to them. I know there's kind of been that stigma around their coach, too, about not winning the big games. And unfortunately, if you look at their record this year, their 2 big games, they didn't come out on top, but both those games were very good. And at the time, you were playing a number 3 team in the nation and the number 1 team in the nation. With SMU, kind of the opposite, I guess. They're over in the ACC. They necessarily didn't play the toughest schedule. However, they're a new ad. They weren't expected to do too much, and they kind of play a little bit different style of football, right? As you could see when they played Clemson the other day, and it kind of sucks for SMU because literally the first quarter, and I think Ryan said this in the group text, it just looked like they were starstruck. They were starstruck, and they just like, I don't know. I even said it in the group text. Yeah, touchdowns. I was like, bro, this is gonna piss me off so bad because I've been riding with the ponies the whole year. And I think you've mentioned it before. It's like one of those teams in Texas that, nobody really has any hate for. Like we wouldn't mind seeing them go and do big things and whatnot. But to go into SMU, like I said, they're more of like their quarterback and their running back. Their quarterback, who surprisingly enough didn't play the whole year. He got subbed in. I think it was like game 3.
Yeah.
And so his stats for this year, I haven't pulled up right now. 3,050 passing yards, 22 touchdowns, 8 interceptions. That's a pretty good stat line. Their running back, who's a stud, has 1,270 yards, 14 touchdowns. Okay, on only 217 carries. So I mean, dude's toting it.
Yeah.
And so it'll be interesting to see Big Ten offense versus I guess we could say ACC offense. I always want to consider SMU in the Big 12, but they really weren't. But they kind of have that offense to where it's very prolific, very high octane, very fast moving. They run a lot of I don't want to say hurry up all the time, but very up tempo. Get to the line, see what's going on, call the play, run around. And I think this is truly just going to be the battle of quarterbacks. I mean, we saw in that Clemson game that, that quarterback for SMU, Jennings, I mean, absolutely wheeled them back into that game and arguably almost won it. I think he did enough to win it. But
I would agree.
Yeah, unfortunately, in that first quarter, it was just like, what are we doing, guys? Like, just calm down.
Yeah.
And then once they calmed down, it was like, boom, 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 going. And I'm going to go against what the line says. I know it says 8.5-point favorites at Penn State. Still going to ride with the ponies. Still, even if they lose, I'm going to ride with them. Okay. But like I said, I think it's going to be a high octane scoring game. I'm going to go 34-31 SMU. I think it's going to be very high scoring. I think it's going to be a bunch of like, I don't know, you've heard the term of like live and die with every play. Like, I think that's how it's going to look. It's going to be like they're either cheering or the game's over with every single play. Yeah. So I think that's what it's going to look like. I think Jennings is going to have to ball out. And so I think SMU is going to surprise everybody.
Yeah, I'm on that side with that Penn State kind of drew a good portion of the bracket to where they got to, and no disrespect to SMU at all. I just think that in terms of like depth with Penn State and them being a big branded team, consistently 4 or 5 star rated, I've had my complaints against them all year, but then when I watched them against Oregon, I thought it is Oregon, but they, putting up 37 points, ain't no slouch. And so I think with my take on this game, short and sweet, is that when you go into an environment like Penn State, especially in the playoffs, it's just such a really tough place to play.
Yeah.
And Ohio State won their game in this environment, but I don't believe that SMU is Ohio State. But I do believe they can put up some numbers. I do believe they're not going to come out and just throw a dud. So I've got a similar prediction, but I'm going to lean Penn State here.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go 28-34 Penn State. Disappointingly, I really think you're right, because I've been rocking with SMU, but I'm trying to like Penn State, man. Like, it's just unfair. Like, you had to go all the way up in the north and play this freaking team, and Penn State, and I cannot. They're one of the teams in college football I just cannot stand. And to see them pull SMU, Boise State, and possibly like Notre Dame if they beat Georgia, it's nonsense. Anyway, you want to trade off, or do you want me to?
Yeah, let's trade off.
Yeah, let's trade off. That's probably better.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So I'll start with Indiana and Notre Dame. So obviously, a lot of people have been controversial about Indiana getting into the playoffs or being a legitimate team and whatnot. And I'm going to blank on the coach's name, but it's like Signetti. And obviously he's been a pretty outstanding coach this year for Indiana, and their point differential has been kind of the main reason why they poked their way into the playoffs. However, both of these teams have not had too much experience with top 25 teams currently in the AP poll all year. To where Indiana they have 0 wins versus top 25 teams. Their best win was against Michigan, which obviously is no slouch because Ohio State lost to them. Their worst loss was to Ohio State away in rainy conditions. But, I don't think this team, like if you watch that Ohio State game, their defense did not play bad at all. It was kind of special teams that screwed over Indiana in that matchup. So I personally don't believe Indiana is a slouch. I really believe that Indiana is worthy of being in the college football playoff. I made my discussions about that, in a previous episode. Then you kind of flip it over to Notre Dame, to where they started off their season going into Kyle Field in week 1 for College game day, big atmosphere, really really tough place to play. Both teams looked really sloppy, but you pulled away the win, and then you just threw an absolute dud against Northern Illinois, which blew up college football analysts' predictions for Notre Dame the rest of the year, because they're like, oh, they have an easy schedule, and then they drop one to Northern Illinois.
Yeah.
And then ever since then, they're on a 10-game win streak of some sort, and beat both our armed forces teams at Navy and Army. And they've done their job. And honestly, watching and kind of keeping track of Notre Dame throughout this season, winning their rivalry game against USC in a grand fashion way, kind of like a hard-nosed ball energy towards the end, to where it's like, yeah, we're going to take these 2 pick sixes back on you guys because screw you. And I like that attitude. I don't like the brand Notre Dame, but I love their coach, Marcus Freeman. So with this game, Indiana going into Notre Dame, another really tough environment to play in, big brand, a lot of people are going to show up, donors, and people are going to buy the tickets and whatnot. I think Indiana gives them a really good fight. I think Indiana really shocks people to which there is a discussion that says Indiana should be in there, no doubts, and they got their opportunity and they played a tough team, and Notre Dame is just that for real. And the other one saying, of course they're going to lose, which is the non-baller, ball knower take. I think this game goes 24-28 to Notre Dame. I think this is going to be a down-to-the-wire matchup. Notre Dame hasn't played a big team like Indiana in a while. So I think I'd be shocked if Indiana throws a dud. I think they're ready. I think they're prepared, and they want to set the record straight.
Yeah. No, our scores are very similar. I agree with you. I think this is going to be closer than what some are imagining. I think I think Notre Dame's a 7-point favorite. I think it's going to be within that. I think they're going to cover. But I agree with you. I mean, they really hadn't played neither team has played like super tough teams this year. And when they have, it's been a little iffy. I think Notre Dame's one was Louisville, maybe, and I don't even think they're ranked anymore. I know there's always that argument about like, oh, they didn't play any ranked teams, when, that argument kind of gets thrown out there, due to Florida State and everything like that. 6 years, so it's like, what is a ranked team? But yes, when Notre Dame has played a ranked team, it's been Louisville, who's not ranked, or Army or Navy, who, I mean, we all hoped, but,
Right.
snap back to reality real quick. But yeah, my prediction was Notre Dame 24, Indiana 21.
Yeah. I do think, like we both predicted there, it's going to be a fight. And obviously, like a lot like the Penn State prediction, I think I'm hoping Indiana pulls out the upset. So
Yeah.
All right, flip it back over to Texas and Clemson.
All right, so we'll get into this. This is another game that is going to be, I don't know, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, the whole controversy with Clemson getting in and where Texas got a draw at and stuff like that. I've said it multiple times on the pod. It depends on which Quinn Ewers you're going to get, or which offense you're going to get, or honestly, which play calling you're going to get. I thought Texas really should have won that game against Georgia. Obviously, they should have. They played better than them. I thought it was very strange how, we talked about like, establish a run, yada, yada. But when you're, run it for 24 times for 40 yards, it's like, hey, Quinn Ewers threw for like 350 yards. It's like, hey, maybe we could keep passing it. And so, to me, it seemed like Texas gave that game, or Texas lost that game more than Georgia won it, as weird as that may seem. Not taking anything away from Georgia. They obviously are a decent football team, and they can play big in big games. I think that was the biggest difference, is that, that's kind of the biggest game outside of A&M that Texas had played. And, obviously Alabama and whatnot. And then Clemson, if you look at their schedule, outside of playing SMU, any big game they played or ranked opponent they played, they didn't do very well against. They lost, or it was a very close game. And so it's going to be very strange. Now, I will say Texas's defense is very good. We all know that. Clemson's quarterback, Cade Klubnik, is very good. If you look at his stats, he doesn't throw many interceptions. He takes care of the ball. He's a playmaker. He can run. He can throw. He can kind of do it all. But I don't know if he's played a defense like Texas yet, so it's going to be very interesting to see how they get the ball moving against Texas. I think this is totally dependent on how, what identity Texas wants to stick with and how they want to adjust. Personally, I think Texas has more firepower than Clemson can, deal with. And so I think that's ultimately going to be the game changer there. If Texas can run the ball, I think, and that sounds like what I just said is very, contradicting, but you see when Texas, if they can establish any kind of run game, they can really just smother a team and take a lot of pressure off of Quinn Ewers. So if Texas can run the ball, I think they win. In my prediction, that's kind of a 12-point favorite is kind of tough in a playoff game, but I've got UT at 24-18.
Oh, yeah, 18.
Yeah.
Yeah, going for two, baby. Going for dose. I think I like all of that, especially with, talking about Clemson, when they're playing, two of their losses came from SEC schools, a rivalry game at the end of the year versus South Carolina, and then at the beginning of the year versus Georgia at the Mercedes-Benz. So Texas, like you mentioned, are they ready for the big game? I think playing Georgia twice gets you ready for a big game.
Yeah.
And I've got Texas winning this game 28-20. I think they punch out a lead pretty early on, maybe a 14-0 lead. We're like, whoa. And then Clemson starts to settle in. It gets closer, but that lead is too far gone for Clemson to really come back. So I think Texas moves the ball better than Clemson in this one, just to simply put it. So yeah, I got Texas winning. So okay.
Does that hurt you deep inside?
Hey, I'm a realist, but yes,
I'm messing with you.
It absolutely does.
Is it getting hot in your room right now? Are you sweating?
The fan's on. I'm going to go over there and turn it on an extra minute. I was like, I turned the fan on the AC, and I went to my office today, and most people in there are Texas fans. I was like,
oh, you just get berated all the time, huh?
Yeah. And they always say Aggie values are surpass the Longhorns, which, knowing that they're all Longhorns fans, I gave them all deer meat as a Christmas gift. So
nice. You're
welcome, guys. We continue to outrank you in intellectual goodness.
Goodness.
I'm kidding. That's because y'all racked up all those wins from 1800 to 1950. Doesn't mean. All right. Indiana and Tennessee.
He's angry. He's angry.
Tennessee and Ohio State. SEC school, Big Ten school. I've been very consistent about Tennessee all year. Because they've been the same team. Young quarterback with Nico, finished 10-2, and somehow didn't play in the SEC championship. I guess with tiebreakers, and they go by best conference record rather than best team overall, which you argue with Wall, but yeah. I don't know. Like, Tennessee was impressive for almost the entire year. However, if you go through their schedule, they didn't play a tough SEC schedule a lot like Texas did. They had like that one big game. Two. They had Bama and Georgia, and they split in those games. But then they took a big L at home to Arkansas midway through the season. But Nico's been kind of the same. Nico's been kind of the same quarterback all year. 20 total touchdowns, 5 picks. He isn't not yet your just blow up the scoreboard quarterback, but he will be. I actually really believe in Nico's potential. But yeah, one win over a current top 25 team so far this year. I mentioned their best wins and their worst losses. You translate that over to Ohio State side, to where they've had opportunities to cement themselves as the number one team in the Big Ten, playing Oregon, losing that one in a very, very close one with a controversial game management ending. Then you go into Penn State's whiteout game and win pretty commandingly. And then you end the year off with a really, really bad loss versus Michigan and go through all of the DB list tantrum that they went through on the field, and then pass a law saying that you can't plant flags. It just got worse and worse. So with all of that, I'm rocking with Tennessee in this one. I got Tennessee winning this one in a very, very close, kind of a defensive ball game, 23-21. SEC gets it done. And my background information for that is that Ryan Day has I believe it's a horrid record versus SEC schools. And I've been a huge advocate of Tennessee's head coach. I think Ryan Day gets outcoached. He loses his job, and then Ohio State hires somebody like Vrabel as their next coach. So, Ohio State fans, they get really impatient when they don't go, 15-0. So
Yeah. Yeah. Very true. Very true. Yeah. So I'm in agreement with you. I'm rocking with Tennessee. Personally, I think their defense is very good. It's been evident all year. Their defense is pretty hard nosed. I agree with you on Nico. I think in a year or two, like he's going to be similar to like that Cade Klubenik style of player that can kind of do it all. And I just think OSU is kind of going in. I know they want to say like, Ryan Day got up on the podium and was like, "Hey, we're worried about the 12-team playoff," and I'm like, "Yeah, but you got beat by Michigan with nobody. Like,
right.
like you got you got outmanned. Not like they had the better players. Like they just outmanned, like man to man you in a game because that game wasn't about
Soft.
talent. That game was about like, hey, we're going to try to play your type of ball. And they just said, okay, well, come on, big boy. And
Yeah.
so it was like, they got beat and in a terrible fashion to a team that wasn't very good this year. And I think that loss is just going to stick with them. And I think they're going to come in not necessarily ready to play. And I think we're going to see something a little different for Tennessee. And I think we're going to actually put up some points. And so I think this might be one of Nico's like breakout, like, yes, everybody knows he's an SEC quarterback and he's really good, but this is going to be that big main stage game where he kind of goes off and probably throws for, 3 or 4 touchdowns. And so I think Tennessee wins this game. It's going to seem close, but it's not going to be that close. But I think it's going to be 31-24. I think it's going to be like 31-17 and then backdoor covered touchdown kind of thing. And so I think it should be 31-24 Tennessee.
I hope to see it. Huge SEC bias for me. I've always been SEC over everything as when the games matter. If you're playing a bowl game and 25-30% of the roster went off to the draft to remove themselves from a bowl game, from the Music City Bowl,
Yeah.
and then some Big 12 team with something to prove comes in there and beats you by 10 or 7 or 4, and they're like, "Well, SEC, blah blah blah." No, like, it's different. You're playing when the stakes matter. SEC typically, from what I've seen, some nerd will correct me, but the SEC shows up. I think they do that against Ohio State. So I guess with all that being said,
you'll see that graphic at the end of the year where it's like Mountain West was 8-0 in bowl games. It's like, okay, well, yeah, sure.
All right. Okay. Well, they all are trying to get a draft spot. So
yes, yeah. So this is their early combine. So
exactly. No kidding. This is their Senior Bowl. Yeah. Okay. With all that being said, so me and Ryan discussed this last week, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to kind of look at it. From all these predictions and whatnot, and you're looking at the bracket, easiest path versus toughest path. Maybe who you think is going to win the whole thing based on, I guess Georgia's injury. We've got Tennessee, Notre Dame, Texas, and the other team, SMU, advancing it on your bracket. Summarizing it, how the path lays out. What do you see happening as the most likely scenario if those things play out, which is unpredictable as hell.
Yeah. So if I picked it, this would be my next matchup would be Tennessee versus Oregon, Texas versus Arizona State, Georgia versus Notre Dame, Boise versus SMU. Boise versus SMU, that'd be freaking wild, huh? So if I had to do it, to me, I think Oregon is the best team in this playoff. And they've been the most consistent. It seems like they can win multiple ways. If Gabriel's off, they seem like they can win it with their defense and a little bit of running game. If something else is off, it seems like Dylan Gabriel and Dan Lanning don't mind scoring 38 and winning 38-35 or whatever, 42-38. So I think they're kind of the most consistent and multiple, scheme way winning team. Because if you look at these other teams, right, like you look at Texas, it's their defense. You look at Georgia, it's their defense. You look at Boise, it's their running game. Ohio State, it's kind of their defense and their weapons. Their quarterback's kind of been, you never know what you're going to get with him. You
Yeah.
know, Notre Dame, it's their quarterback. Penn State, it's their quarterback kind of thing. So I think they're kind of your clear-cut best team in saying that, you know, Tennessee will probably beat them now that I say that. But, you know, if I had to pick it, I think Oregon will make it from that side of the bracket. Um, so I think Tennessee beats Ohio State, Oregon beats Tennessee, and then I'll say Texas beats Clemson, and then I think Texas unfortunately beats Arizona State. I know that's kind of
By a large amount.
yeah, I think that's going to be interesting because that coach seems like a super cool dude. I don't know if you
Yeah.
saw what all he's come out and said about the transfer portal and
Yeah,
how he
I saw
treats his
that.
guys. I think that's a super awesome viewpoint and way to view things with that is saying like, hey, dude, we want you here, but if you're got a chance to make more money, go do it. Like if
Yeah.
you think you need to be somewhere else, well, let me make a call. Tell me where you want to go. And I think that's how it should be treated. I mean,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you know, not counting a few people in college football, you're dealing with 18 to 22, 23-year-old kids, right? And
Yeah.
so, you know, you're not going to sit here and I think it's, you know, unfortunate for people to just dog cuss or treat these kids, you know, badly just because they want to go somewhere else. It's like, calm down, guy. And
Yeah.
so
For real.
that that being said, that means I'd have Oregon and Texas in that semifinal on that side. So I got Notre Dame beating Indiana and then playing Georgia. God, if Carson Beck plays, I don't think if either quarterback plays, I don't think they beat Notre Dame, which is going to be a shock. I
Yeah.
think Notre Dame will beat Georgia. And then say if SMU does make it against Boise State, I'll still have to ride with my ponies, so we'll have SMU winning it. So I'll have Notre Dame versus SMU, Oregon versus Texas. But then, you know, I'd still have to ride with Oregon and ride with SMU. So I'd have Oregon and SMU. I think it's highly
Shit.
unlikely, but
That would be awesome.
that's what I would want. Okay. That would be what I would want, I guess. If I had to pick what'll probably happen, honestly, I could see what'll probably happen is it'll probably be like Oregon, Penn State. It'll probably
Yeah.
be, I don't
That's
think,
what I said. Yeah.
yeah, I think Penn State kind of has an easy draw. I think Georgia kind of has an easy draw, but I think once Oregon gets up against a team to their standard, as in Penn State, I think Penn State will do them, you know, like win pretty badly against them, especially if Georgia doesn't have a quarterback.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd say Oregon and Penn State. Looking at this, like that's crazy that Penn State could arguably play the number 9 and 10 team,
Yeah. Yeah.
and those two being, you know, Mountain West and ACC, where Oregon's got to go Big Ten or SEC,
Yep.
decent school.
Maybe
Arizona
double
State,
SEC.
yeah, Arizona State has to go. Yeah, yeah, that's crazy. Yeah, so Oregon potentially is either playing, you know, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12 champion, or SEC, ACC champion. So it's like that's a pretty tough
Yeah.
side of the bracket.
Yeah. No doubt. Me and you have very similar wants and what's going to happen
Yeah,
or what's most likely going to happen scenarios. I mean,
I guess
I agreed with you as well.
if I absolutely wanted it this way, I don't think it'll ever work out this way. But I think it'd be funny to have Texas and SMU play against each
Oh
other.
yeah,
But
that'd be sick.
if I had my true number one want, it would be UT SMU. My second more realistic want would be Oregon SMU, but the most realistic thing is going to be Oregon versus Penn State.
I don't want to get it wrong, but I believe Ryan had Tennessee making it all the way to the national championship.
Yeah, I mean
Which
Tennessee. I mean their defense is good and
good enough.
their quarterback's good. I don't think right now he's great, but he's good, and I don't think he's necessarily just going to lose you games.
Yeah, yeah, he's good and young, and they've done a good job of minimizing turnovers with a young quarterback. So,
Yeah,
I'm a believer. I can see it happen. Rocky Top, which I said actually. Now that's jogged my memory. I said that I could see a headline where Tennessee won or made it to the national championship, and then they connect it to with Tennessee winning the baseball national championship
yeah,
in Omaha and having this headline going, Tennessee won 2 championships in less than a year. and then it
The
gets
kings of SEC.
yeah, the kings of the SEC,
And then they win one, and then they win one in March Madness, and it's just like, oh god.
Oh yeah, exactly. All right. Well, I think that was an excellent episode. I think we got everything covered that we needed to get covered. I'm excited to see how this all plays out. Obviously, so I'm trying to think of when the next time we'll be on. Closer to New Year's. So I guess we'll either be able to predict the quarterfinal or it'll be right after. We'll see. But we'll be back to cover more college football, and then we'll be 1 or 2 weeks out from NFL playoffs. So things are heating up and ending in a different sport. So
Yep.
And getting closer and closer to season 3. So
Yeah. And hockey season. Hockey season has started. Go Stars.
Go Stars, baby. All right. We will see y'all in about 2 weeks closer to New Year's. So everybody have a Merry Christmas from Stats and Scars and a Happy New Year. God bless us, everyone. So
Knew it. I knew it. Hell yeah.
All right. Y'all take care. Have a good holiday.